going in the shower, because that's what I'm going to do. Have a shower. And there's something I'm thinking quite extraordinary, very extraordinary, that happens to a person around the age of 40. Not to everyone, of course, only those who have been paying attention, only those who have not been entirely asleep through the first half of their lives. And what happens is this: they begin to notice, not with a dramatic revelation, not with some cinematic collapse of everything they once believed, nothing so theatrical. It is a quieter than that, far less convenient. It is the slow recognition that much of what once felt urgent was not, that the things they spent years chasing, the titles, the approval, the carefully constructed version of a life that looked right from the outside, have a curious tendency to feel strangely weightless once attained. And this is unsettling because they did not drift into that space carelessly. They worked, they tried, they made decisions that seemed sensible, even admirable. They followed the map as it was given to them. And yet, at some point, they look around and find themselves asking, almost reluctantly, is this it? Is this all? It is a peculiar thing to realize that you have been running without ever quite questioning the destination. In youth, this is invisible. Everything feels urgent then. Every choice appears definitive. Every failure carries a weight of heavy implication that it might mean something permanent about who you are and what it's going to make you. A missed opportunity feels catastrophic. A rejection feels personal. A mistake feels like evidence. Because when you are young, you believe quite sincerely that you are in the process of becoming someone and that every moment is contributing to that construction. And so you build an identity out of effort, achievement, comparison, expectation, and you gather pieces from everywhere: family, culture, ambition, fear, and assemble something that feels, at very least, convincing. This is necessary, very necessary. One cannot see through the illusion until one has first believed in it. But somewhere around 40, the structure begins to reveal its seams, not because it collapses, but because you begin to see that it was, in many ways, assembled rather than discovered. You notice how many of your goals were inherited, how many of your fears were taught, how many of your striving was, in truth, an attempt to secure something that never quite arrived. And with that noticing comes a quiet, persistent discomfort. Because if you are not the roles you have been performing, not the achievements you have accumulated, not the version of yourself you have been presenting, then what exactly remains? This is the point at which many people become inventive. They change the scenery, upgrade the symbols, rearrange the external markers of success in the hope that the feeling will follow. Sometimes it looks impressive. It rarely works because the question is still there, waiting patiently beneath all of it. Who are you when there's nothing left to prove? And if, by some combination of courage and exhaustion, you do not run from that question, if you allow it to remain unanswered for long enough, something remarkable, really remarkable, begins to happen. You start to notice what has always been there, not the constructed self, not the curated identity, but something quieter, more stable, less interested in performance. The next part of you that has watched every success and every failure pass through without ever being fundamentally altered by either. The part of you that existed before you had anything to do to prove and will remain long after you stop trying. This is why the first 40 years are not wasted, though they may feel, in retrospect, somewhat misdirected. They are preparatory, not in the sense of a building a perfect life, but in the sense of gathering evidence. Evidence that achievement does not secure peace, that approval does not guarantee belonging, that certainty is far more fragile than it first appears. You learn this not intellectually, but through repetition, through disappointment, through the slow erosion of ideas that once felt unquestionable. And eventually, if you're paying attention, you stop. You stop arguing with the reality. By 40, you have made enough mistakes to realize they do not define you. You have chased enough things to see that not all of them were worth catching. You have tried, in one way or another, to prove yourself and discovered that proof, once obtained, has a remarkably short shelf life. And this is where something like freedom begins. Not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet kind. The kind It comes from no longer needing to be seen in a particular way, from no longer organizing your life around invisible expectations, from no longer mistaking urgency for important. So life does not begin at 40 in a way it is often described. It does not begin because everything suddenly improves. It begins because something unnecessary falls away. The noise, the performance, the exhausting effort of trying to become someone you were never entirely convinced by in the first place. And what remains is simpler, less impressive perhaps, but unmistakably more real. Because in the end, those first 40 years were never about becoming someone worth being. They were about exhausting all the ways you thought you had to. Simple. Why would you not? It's a lesson. Life's a lesson. Everything's a lesson.